worked in the Complutense University in Madrid as a teacher, as a professor, and she's also a researcher, and she does great efforts also in dissemination. She's focused her works on the Second Republic and the dictatorship of Franco, the fascist Franco. And she's the author of more than 25 articles, papers. And we have Los Años del Plomo. It's a research she has coordinated with Francisco Espinosa, Manuel Álvaro, and José María García Márquez. Forzados y forzosos, el trabajo de los prisioneros, forced the works of prisoners. This is another publication by her. Her doctoral thesis broaches the war press in the Republican area during the Spanish War between 1936 and 1939. And she's also authored of many books: Los Años del Terror, Mujeres Caídas, Prostitutas Legales y Clandestinas. This is the titles of her books: Disciplina y Conciencia, Las Brigadas Internacionales y su artillería de papel. She's co-author with Antonio Rojas of a book that is very innovative in terms of Francoist research in Madrid, and that is soon to be published. Now Mirta is going to open this Congress talking us about the beginning. And this is what was happening in Malaga by around January and February 1937, during the first months of the war, just before the occupation that was led by genocide, by the genocide Capo de Llano. So she's going to deal with difficulties, challenges, the defense strategy for Malaga, the lack of armament, the lack of resources by the Republican Army. So all these topics she has researched about, and she's going to share with us. Thank you very much, Mirta. The floor is yours.
Gracias, Rafael, y muchas gracias a los asistentes.
Thank you very much, Rafael, and thank you to all the participants here. There are many things to do here, and in this amazing place. And it's a great opportunity to share with you all our works that are connected to Malaga and to all this suffering that took place here. The paper that I'm going to share with you here is a part of my doctoral thesis. I worked really hard. I published 3 volumes that I had the opportunity to make thanks to a grant for the research. And then I could study all this. So the front of Malaga was a secondary front line in my studies, but it was a very important because it's very particular. This front line is very connected with the real world. It has a very good connection with the real world. And as Rafael just said, I've been in touch with Rafael since the beginning, and he was saying that there were many different problems. One of these problems was the lack of contact with Madrid and with some core elements, core agents of the army. But this was not an exception. It was something normal many of the front lines were dealing with this kind of problems. At the beginning of the war, the rebel army was very organized. They had been planning the coup for a long time, but in the Republican area, it was absolutely unexpected. And this explains the lack of coordination, the lack of information, unluckily, of course. The press was a very important tool, a very important element. It was of great interest, and it was developed by the militia units and then by the regulars, which is the regular army, which is going to be the name of the Republican Army. It was the national army, in fact, but later on the national term was monopolized by the fascists. So when we say nationals, we usually talk about the Francoist army, but in fact it was the national army, was the army of the Republic. So this army, the Republican army, is facing this imposition by the fascist army. And there is the global context that is dominated by the Nazi powers that are also funding this coup. So the rebels, the fascist army, they have weapons and they have great coordination and planning for the coup. But in the Republican area, we were lacking of this organization. Then little by little, they corrected, the situation got a little bit better, and this is beautiful in a way because we can observe, we can see the will to keep the contact with the rear world and also the inner contacts inside the units. So we're not being so militarist. We're trying, for the good and for the bad, but we're trying to promote a greater connection between the military units. And this is something we can see in the press, in the war press. What do we call war press? By this expression, I talked about the press made by the militias at the beginning and then by the military of the Republic. How many press publications we had? Well, I've found in Spain in general, mainly in Madrid, a little bit in Salamanca as well, because the insurgent army, the rebel army, as you know, they gathered all the documents and journals and all kind of publications of the Republic, and they put all them together in Salamanca, which is now a very important file or a very important archive for the study of the repression. So, as I was saying, I studied all these documents in Madrid, Salamanca, and also, because of the circumstances I just mentioned, in Barcelona as well, but a little bit less. But you have Madrid with bombings since August 1933, but we still have a lot of these publications in the library, municipal library in Madrid, and most of them are also digitalized. These publications are usually quite precarious or fragile, mostly those of the Republican period. You can imagine there are bombings, so and all this surprising rebellion. So the Republicans, they give a response just as they can. But it is important to mention that the political parties and also other organizations, they contribute with their infrastructure and with their knowledge, and they support different publications about the military unit in which they were fighting. So if the Republicans were in militias, then they would do as much as they could. They would put all their means at the service of communication and information. For instance, we have the newspaper Frente Sur, South Front, from the Andalusian militias. Many publications that actually give voice to the militias and to the military units. They are a little bit isolated, so they don't have a great scope, a great reach. And this also shows difficulties or challenges in terms of cohesion and coordination. We can see from these units that the militias, they last longer than the Popular Front Army. So in the Central Republican area, around September, October, there is already a will to transform the militias in military units, and on the contrary, in Andalusia, the militias last longer. What's the information that is dealt with in these military units? Well, there are some common topics. We're going to see it. We offer information on the present, but also on the past. And this is made in order to justify the reasons of the fight and in order to make the fighters remember why they are in this combat. So they highlight that there is a democracy even inside the army. So this sometimes leads to the maintenance of certain customs in the Republican area. For instance, are you from the house of the people? Then the house of the people has to give you to eat. So this is something the rich in Andalusia shall say in order to promote the fight. So in Andalusia, for every 82 kilos of olives, the peasant will take only 1.5 pesetas. So this is a way to make remember the hunger, the bad treatment that the peasants would receive. And they also highlight that the agricultural reform and the Second Republic came to change these kind of attitudes from the landlords, from the rich men.
Luego se habla también de la falta de control.
Another one of the topics is the lack of control in the Republican area. Order. They're seeking for more order. And they also highlight the need of obeying the military order, the military hierarchy. And then this inside attitude, this inner attitude, where they say, if you deny the militarization, then you are someone who's not fighting for freedom, but who wants to take profit of the state and live a life of a pig. Well, this is the language they used. In warfare, there is an inner struggle, theoretical fight between those discussing about the first action put in place in terms of militarization. We all know that anarchists and Trotskyists, they're going to support for a long time the militia. And we try to avoid conflicts because of these decisions. So we try to make people think and to support reflection on the need of this popular army. They want to think about why it was convenient to make the militias disappear. Then later on, they deal with other aspects of militarization. For instance, the mandatory military service that is approved, and we confront those who want to keep the militias in place. So with time, the militias are accused of being the reason of losing Malaga. And they point out at the weakness of militia. We have this newspaper called Obreros y Soldados, Workers and Soldiers, that is in place until February 1937. And they say, we do not want to mention the causes that explain the losing of the beautiful Malaga. We better talk about the beautiful reaction that these events have made in the working class, because these people has demanded unity, a single commandment, and also the mandatory military service. This is Obreros y Soldados, the number 3, issued on the 26th February 1937.
In
Malaga, we still have this defense model that had already disappeared in other regions of the Republican Spain. And so we see once and again texts that expose what has the experience lived in Malaga and the demands of the people in there. They ask for a single commandment and the fight against the stereotypes about Andalusia. They say these lies made up by the bourgeois writers about the Andalusian population. This sentence appears in Venceremos, We Shall Win, which was a publication of Jaén that issued 38 numbers. And we can see this kind of declarations, this kind of text in many publications.
En los periódicos de guerra,
in the war press, we also have a section about the overrun Spain, or the invaded Spain, which is the Franco Spain, a territory invaded by Moroccan people, Italians, French people. And for this invaded Spain, we already talk about retaliation. In Baena, for instance, 1,200 shot person. So I haven't studied Baena. I studied mostly Madrid with terrifying figures. Madrid is really iconic in terms of death toll, because there were a huge number of assassinations by the Francoist forces.
Hasta finales del año 36.
And up to 1936, by the end of 1936, we still talked about the democratic section with a publication called Cefa that describes itself as anarchist in the South Front. So they organized meetings of delegates, and at the same time we have the newspapers talking about the demands regarding the militia model, and they also talk about the meetings of the Republican Parliament that still gathers in Valencia.
Muy bien, te doy la bienvenida y así aprovecho para...
Well, I would like to welcome you, Carmen Negrin. We have met in several occasions already. And as she quite well knows, I am a great defender of Negrin. I think that she did everything possible to win the war and for the rearmament of the Republic, even in international spheres. Because unfortunately, since the beginning, the international scope was quite hostile for the Republic. So very soon, since August 1936, they created the Non-Intervention Committee, non-intervention in Spanish events. So we find this lack of arms and weapons that, in this South Front in Malaga, they complained that they were lacking all kinds of war armament, because this non-intervention committee that, by the way, worked really bad for the Republican Spain, they didn't interfere in the Republican Spain. They wouldn't sell weapons. That was the main objective, to sell arms to the Republican Spain. But as we well know, for the Franco-related Spain, these arms were kept on being sold, and all kinds of war-related material. We need to remember that before this Republican Spain leading it, we had some very powerful armies, like the Nazi army. And what we commonly say is that those birds of a feather flock together, and everything that can go wrong actually happened. Traitors, military traitors. You have to remember Malaga. Very soon, Malaga will be set up as a flag for the whole of the Republican Spain. Remember Malaga? Its streets are populated, full of cadavers and corpses. Also, the disasters and atrocities sum up in the hands of the rebel military people. terrible monsters, that's what they call them. We have to remember also Badajoz. So first Malaga, then Guernica, then Badajoz. If we do not have another reason to think about the fight against the invader, the Hitler section will offer it, bombing Almeria. And what I said is that, how unlucky Madrid is. Madrid was started to be bombed. The rebel troops started to bomb Madrid in August 36 and up until March 39. But we weren't lucky enough to have this. There's a very important painting, El Guernica, and I said instead of Guernica they could have called it Madrid or Malaga, but we were not lucky enough for that, and that's why we forget about Madrid a little bit. About that Spain, which is suffering from the bombings and the enemy shootings. About that Spain, we have the newspapers that try to remember or remind us of the objectives of the Republic and the government, and that would be the representation of the chamber, and that refers to the parliament. And they still insist on the fact that the Republic is a democratic model before the fascism presented by the rebel model. So, in that Spain, in which Malaga plays a very important role, we have to highlight that in that Malaga, they will apply what the rebels developed in order to dominate the population, not only the population in Malaga, because everything that happened there and anything that happened in that road from Malaga to Almeria, it serves as a reference for the rest of the country. So they will say, have a look, notice what happened in Malaga, and this is what will happen to you if you continue defending the Republic. So for the rebels, this was crucial. There is an ongoing threat, and we can see that with the talks of cable. With those forces that were mercenary forces that were paid, as we know, as the Moroccan ones, they were paid, and that's what they are saying. They're not called like this nowadays. So I apologize, but they will say the Moorish will come, and you'll see when that happens. So we leave 48 hours to just go inside, and then the Moorish will get there first. And I apologize for using that term, but that's the way they were referred to, and that's one part of this war propaganda, which was based on real facts, not only on menaces or threats. It was based on real facts. About those defeated, and over those defeated, there will fall a very bloody repression. And in that bloody repression, we always have to remember thousands of deceased, of dead people. Actually, in the cemetery of Malaga, we can see unfortunately, it's one of the most populated cemeteries, together with Seville. And something else that was very important was the development of certain strategies to, what we would say, to tame, with an iron hand, to tame the population. On the one hand, throughout 1939-40, there were more than 200,000 prisoners, political prisoners, who were taken to jail in the year 39, and these are figures which most of us agree on, 270,000 political prisoners in the year 39 and 233,000 ones in the year 40. With these figures, they do some pedagogy, so it's a pedagogy of terror, because surviving in these Franco jails, and of course to get there from the very beginning, and the ones that they had at the beginning, it was very difficult. So that was another way of expressing the need to surrender, and to saying to people, you know, here you're going to find what you were searching for. But this was not the only pedagogy of terror that was done. Those who were sick, you know, because when they went through Franco jails, the passing through those jails was determinant. I will remind you of Miguel Hernández, those prisoner wards and masses, as the jail was not big enough for all of them. All around Spain, they would use monasteries, convents, schools, and all kinds of centers to include all these people, sometimes in terrible conditions. And these were political prisoners, although since the beginning, and this is interesting, since the beginning they were not called political prisoners, and that's part of that strategy that had left, that's still present and currently. The idea of changing the name, they're saying it's not a coup d'etat, it's just an uprising, and it's like, no, that's not what happened. And so far it's still being debated on. The far-right political parties in this country do not want to accept it, and they do not want to use or clarify that confusing terminology that it's been used by Franchism. So these prisoners that tried to survive in jails, monasteries, schools, and anywhere where they could be imprisoned. Here in Andalusia, you know about oligarchy as well. So we had the idea of lending small palaces, etc., that would be put at the service of the army, of the military groups. Up to the year 41, hunger was terrible in jails. But that was not enough for that justice that we're trying to, all these justice, as we would say, that wanted to apply to those that had surrendered. Because actually that was not the victory. It was more of the crushing of those defeated with a purpose. Those who survived would suffer this kind of punishment. This is a term that is not used maybe in the term in Spanish, escarmiento. It's a term that is not very much used anymore, but it's a very adequate one, because it is applied. It's like saying, you know, we're applying bloody justice and bloody repression, and those who survive have to learn from it. Why? Because they have to move away from any kind of political action. It's not so that the rebels, Frankists, or that they wouldn't also work with this politics. They did, but they would leave to the Spanish population the notion that politics are wrong, and if you do it, it can drive you yourself and your children. It can lead you to the wrong path. So they would say, parents would say to their children, do not get into that. I think that everybody remembers this. Still today, we have some layers of that notion of, politics are wrong because, it could be against the one which is being applied, and it could even go against the concept of citizenship because you're not a citizen anymore. And also something that's linked to this strategy is silence. If you are quiet, this wouldn't have happened to you. So if you keep quiet, there will be more possibilities. Yourself and your family will have more possibilities of surviving. On the other hand, what we're seeing is the strategy of scaring people, of fear. We know, and continuously we get news, and thanks to the fact that circumstances have been changing, with the fight and effort of La Desbandada and other organizations that are similar, they would straightly kill not only political prisoners but their family members as well. And they would leave them there for everybody to see so that people would learn. And that's part of the strategy of what they were trying to do. They said, well, these were the ones that were in the House of People, La Casa del Pueblo. So other aspects of this movement is this can also happen to you, of trying to intimidate people. The idea of trying to bring away those who had been made themselves visible. And they would say to you, do not make yourself visible, because if that happens, there are more possibilities that you will be killed or that you would be put to jail. The very famous, the pointing finger, right? The finger that would say, you've been there doing something that was legal, right? It was absolutely legal. But that's what's incredible. And also, and something else that I didn't want to leave aside, the Catholic Church would bless this situation and would put it to its service. So not only the Catholic Church would accuse those who didn't go to church, but those that belong to the House of People or the Athenaeum. So this world of the accusation, the pointing, intimidation, this has a lot of protagonists, and among them, the Catholic Church. I have to say that, of course, as well, there were some Republican priests, not many of them, but we had some of them, and nowadays we are recovering their figures, their images, and some of them were those of the accusations and the accusation, intimidation. Some of them were in favor of the Republic and they didn't want to take part in this pedagogy of terror. Many others did, and in a very clear and open way. With this, I think it's very important to move forward with what meant a very wide and structure of the pedagogy of terror and pain. Jails, hunger, dirt, they're all learning. And thanks to the fact that for many, their partners would help them. They would take food to them when that was allowed. They would take clean clothes for them. So this was part of this pedagogy of terror. you were lucky enough if you could survive, and these led to the other part of the jail structure and the repression structure, which were the concentration camps, which of course will be present in the Republican Spain, these concentration camps in which they continued in this line of action. To survive in those concentration camps, and with this I also want to acknowledge the effort made by women. Women supported those that went to jail and concentration camps in the whole of Spain, and they helped them bring in them food or clean clothes, as we said. So women are very much present in the whole of Spain with that unconditional support offered to those that ended up in the hands of those that won the war. We're talking about terror and we're talking about repression, but we also need to say that in this Spain that up to the year 41 found itself in a terrible situation and with general and generalized hunger, the those that were part of the coup wanted to bring about a line that still remembered nowadays. This is this Latin motto, which is dura lex et lex, which means it's a hard law, but it's the law. So what we say, what we do, is the law itself. We're not like those people, you know, the militian people, undocumented ones. No, this is the law, and the law will be at your service. And this has been heard up to very recent times. The law at your service. And this law at your service poses the idea that what they do is just comply with the law and apply it. So it's not any kind of irregular repression. So one part of these prisoners that will stay in those jails for a very long time, those who survived the criminal stage, which is the stage of the close-range shooting, and all of those were taken to another structure, which is the forced labor. What are we going to do with all these people? They also have to eat something, at least, to survive. So for that, they created the forced labor battalions. These groups are present in the whole of the Spanish territory, and they serve to the main objective of the taming of people, so to speak. So the rebels, they're trying to tame the defeated ones with an iron hand, we would say, with throughout pain, with the pedagogy, like we're seeing. But this is what's being applied. And those forced labor groups will be present in the whole of Spain to build the very famous Franco ditches. Sometimes they retake republic projects, and projects in the republic in which the workforce were the defeated ones. These workforce, the truth is that they had had a lot of time to think about it, and they're paid virtually nothing, but in a way that they cannot say they're slaves. So they're prisoners that receive a humble salary for their work, and it's like a joke, but it is like that. So this is the idea they're trying to sell. They're not slaves at all, even though we defend and we say that of course they were slaves. They were slaves of Franco regime. We've talked about dams. We've talked about the rebuilding and refurbishing of monasteries, the prisoners' canal infrastructures that are going to be rebuilt and also improved thanks to this workforce, these slaves. And they would say, yeah, you know, but this is, they were searching for it, right? This is the consequence of their actions. That's what they continuously said, because then you're separating those from the rest of the population. You're telling them this is your punishment. You were asking for it. So this is the way in which they try to isolate, when we talk about like putting people in a capsule, right? Isolating them. Those who fought for the Republic and are here in Spain. And those who are not in Spain and... yes, okay, we need to finish soon before I get told off. Those who stayed in Spain are continuously accused, wrongly accused, and they say to them, they are the Reds, right? They were asking for it. This defamation, and that's happened until very recently. They would say something like, oh, you know, but their family, they were red, right? And that's why they were expropriated and dispossessed of their properties, and they took all of their goods and possessions, and that's the circumstance due to which they are in the current situation. Everything in the line that we knew of. And so far, we still have a lot to recover. Also, we need to say that for that era, that is that starts to be built since March of the year 39, with the end of the Civil War. For the strategy, they're not going to count on leaders, because at the beginning they want to. They were putting an end to those that were part of the political structure of the Republic in any of the stages. For example, it could be a municipality or the parliament itself. In a way that there are villages in which they put an end to the municipal corporation. For example, in the village of Madrid and the village of Galapagar, they killed 4 out of the 5 members of the municipal corporation. And the same thing happened in many other places in Spain. So what they're saying with this is, you know, they shot them because they deserved it, because they were members of the council. And on the other hand, they are getting rid of any kind of possibility of reconstruction in the Republican area, of political reconstruction in this Republican area. And this will be very evident for all actions carried out in Spain for the reconstruction of the political world. That, as I mentioned, is much wider. And I said that what they try to do is to use calumny against the image of the Republic. I am an active working professor, and when they ask our students, still you find students that answer the same that they did in the Franco era. And I say, you know, how is this possible? Haven't you read anything else? And the answer would be no, you know, between brackets, but no, the majority of them haven't. So they're saying the same thing as your grandfather could say, you know, it's a good thing if you read, and maybe if you did, you wouldn't say this. You know, the Republic was the first 20th century Spanish democracy, no more, no less, and that's not a little thing to say. So just assume it and read, but nowadays the reading part is a little bit difficult. Okay, I don't want to be told off, sorry, as I said. Thank you so much for your attention, and long live the Republic.
Podría llevar un gran debate, pues todo.
Of course, we could open a huge discussion, a very exciting debate about everything that Mirta has exposed, but we don't have the time. We have to go on to the next lecture. But maybe just a quick comment. What happened? How come that victims were turned into guilties, into the ones that were guilty of losing democracy? That was a permanent strategy that led to the shooting of many people who had come back from the road massacre, from La Desbandada, because the judges will say they might have done something because they are flighting, they are escaping, so they should have done something. So this logic was terrible, and the ones that were defending the freedom and the liberty were turned into guilty of their own terror, their own deaths.